in New England, we have a lot of bridges that, especially covered bridges, that seem to have these stories associated with them, whether it be these legends that have developed in other places as well, but they seem to all have some sort of story attached to them. I don't think there's any bridge around here that doesn't have a story associated with it. In other areas, in other regions of the country, do you find that it's the same thing, that all these bridges seem to have a story, or does it get to the point where sometimes it's few and far between to find a ghost story from a certain area?
Well, you definitely have it made in the Northeast. You guys, for sure, have probably the highest percentage per state. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the great collection of covered bridges that are up there. Like when you talk about the bridges in New England, which I'm not a New Englander, so I don't even know what states are considered New England, but I always think about Emily's Bridge in Stowe, Vermont.
Right.
Is that considered New England?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay. And yeah, I mean, it does seem like in the Midwest, and as you go even farther west, that we don't have the density of stories concerning bridges and haunted bridges. But we also, that these part of the countries aren't as old as New England is. So I think a lot of weight goes into the history that you guys have up there.
Well, you mentioned Emily's Bridge, and for those who aren't familiar, if you could share the story associated with that.
Sure. It's actually called the Goldbrook Covered Bridge in Stowe, Vermont, and it's a pretty well-known little small covered bridge with ghost hunters. In fact, it's so popular that the local police there are well aware every single night there's going to be a slew of people out there with cameras and audio recorders and such trying to capture activity. Mm-hmm. But the basic story is that a young bride named Emily was, let me preface this by saying there's also a couple versions of the story. The most well-known is that a young bride-to-be named Emily was on her way to her wedding when her horse carriage wrecked on the bridge and she was thrown off and killed. There's a second version of that story that she actually went to the wedding and the husband-to-be didn't show up, so she went back to the bridge where they would often meet and hang out, and when he never showed up, she hung herself there. And then there's a third version of the story in which the husband actually hangs himself first, and then she comes, finds his body, and then she hangs herself. But whichever one you believe, people claim that the spirit of Emily now haunts this bridge, and she's kind of an angry spirit, if you've heard any of the stories about her.
Well, and we have a lot of those type of stories, though, around here where, there always seems to be those, and we talked about this before in the first hour, there always seems to be those tragedies that are associated with them, that are associated with any location. Do you feel like that these traumas, these things that happen, leave an impact on on these bridges because they're so strong, because they mean so much? Or do you think that it's a matter of just more that it's a quaint legend, and a quaint way to keep the legend going is by attaching it to these bridges? Because I almost feel like when talking about these stories, the fact that you are dealing with some of the, and this as an investigator, you have the running water that can amplify the activity. You have the bridge, which represents a crossing. It's almost like the factors are right for there to be a haunting, but the stories are also so good. You wonder, does the haunting exist because of the backstory, or does the haunting exist because of the factors that allow this activity to keep going? I think I'm making sense in this question. I'm not sure.
You are making sense. Well, I don't think there's any one answer. I mean, for some bridges, it's definitely a story that's just been attached to the bridge to sort of give us some explanation. But I also think, when you go to the bridges that legitimately get a lot of activity and people really are capturing good, evidence there, that absolutely the environmental conditions are playing a part in that. I mean, one of the things that I've certainly discovered over the years is that a lot of the activities that happen in homes and haunted restaurants and wherever tend to be very environmental. And it does seem like, especially with residual type ghosts, that some dramatic moment was just, passionate enough that moment in time was just captured by the environment. And more often than not, you take a look around at, is there a creek nearby, like you're talking about the running water? All those building blocks for basically a battery are in place to sort of hold that information there. Now, with intelligent hauntings, I think the bigger question is, are they trapped by something in the environment? I'm often curious, you know, is the difference between a home where someone died and there is no ghost to a home where someone died and there is a ghost, is there an environmental difference that's actually trapping them there against their will?
And we deal with that here a lot because so many of our haunted locations here have, you know, fieldstone foundations. They have granite, which is rich in quartz, in the foundation, and that's actually recording and amplifying the energy that happens. So, you know, you can actually find these geological factors, these physical factors that actually can play into why these hauntings happen. And I think with bridges, the water is certainly part of it. There was some question in the chat room about, you know, the folklore of how spirits are supposed to not be able to cross running water, but then, you know, the pseudoscience of it all shows us that running water actually does charge things up and actually makes activity happen a little bit more prominently.
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, if anything in the ghost hunting world has been sort of accepted by the community, it's that spirits are most likely, you know, based around electromagnetic fields, some sort of electricity. And we all know that water definitely conducts electricity. And as you say, even acting sort of as a battery of sorts, it can actually even amplify it. Yeah, I mean, but I was reading some of the stuff in your chat room too. I'd never heard of ghosts being turned back by water, but I had heard that about vampires.
I said, no, I had heard it about spirits, about them not, you know, if you're being chased by something, if you can get to water, they kind of become trapped by it. And I actually had shared that story just recently. We did an event in the Bridgewater Triangle where I was stationed at a park all night that had a little tiny covered bridge. I'm talking like maybe like a 10-foot crossing of this little tiny covered bridge. But that was one of the things that I told everybody. I was like, you know, one of the folklore things that I've heard is that, you know, spirits supposedly can't follow you across running water. So if something's chasing after you, run to the bridge.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything in the future. Also, make sure that you're following Spooky South Coast across all social media, especially Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.